and to educate the listenership and giving different listeners different perspectives. And also, what is not important is what I believe or what I think, because I learn with a lot of these interviews. So I'm very, 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 very blessed at this moment as we're doing this interview as well. Now, earlier you touched on something that we touched on here in this program in a series that we did called East Meets West. And what we discussed, or what we kind of got out of that program in that series, was that the contrast between the East and the West is that we noticed that in the East, religion, or at least faith or philosophy, is allowed to develop in many cultures from within. Whereas here in the West, there always has to be a dictatorship, someone dictating to you, whether it be a priest, a bishop, a pastor, a teacher, prophet, whatever. But in Eastern philosophy, it seems, and that's probably why the lure, what we kind of discussed, why the attraction to Eastern philosophy exists, because it discusses, or at least allows an individual to develop from within. Is that true? And if that being the case, have they taken a part of what we've been talking about, in opposed to what we see here in the West?
I think what you brought up is a good point. And what I do is, instead of looking at it as East and West, is I kind of look at it as the collective group consciousness that exists within this reality. So if you move it to that level, and you go back to what I said earlier about religion and the needing a vent for people who are intuitive, if we looked at the collective group mind, of which we are all a part of, the collective group mind must always be in balance. So therefore, in the West, they will dictate to us from the external what our religious beliefs should be, and we're supposed to buy into that. On the East, they let you go inside. So the group mind is still in balance overall when you look at it from that perspective. Now, what they've done in the East is they've taken away the material comforts. What they've done in the West is they've given you material comforts. So they're still keeping the balance. It's kind of like when the Great Wall fell down, the wall of the Eastern Bloc. There, people behind the wall at that point had very little personal freedom, and we had a lot of freedom. Think of the group mind again, the collective unconsciousness. Now what happens, we have less freedom, they have more freedom. So they're still maintaining an overall balance within the collective mind pattern within this reality. So when I look at it from that perspective, I kind of take out that layer that you're addressing, because that's the layer that most people get distracted with. People are really looking for the balance, and that's why they're attracted to the East. And from the East, if you're there, and I mean, if you don't have adequate food, if you don't have adequate shelter, then you're looking more for that. So it's really a balance within the collective, which represents the balance that we're seeking inside of ourselves.
So they both kind of play a role conducive to one another.
And it's been divided. Instead of saying you can have both, they have divided us very effectively and distracted us. Because then the people in the West say, oh, the materialism is wrong and bad, therefore I should have what's in the East. And the people in the East say, oh, I would like to have, adequate food, adequate shelter, therefore what the West has is what I want. So again, they're still mixing us up and distracting us within this play between ourselves. Instead of, if you go above that and you look down from the God mind, or what I call, which we haven't really addressed, but I call it the oversoul level of what's really going on. What's really going on is they've just divided your materialistic needs and your spiritual needs, and they put one in the West and one in the East. That's it. And now you just have to bring that back together, so you have everything that you need, whether you're East or West.
I see. Well, now we're going to kind of get to that portion which you talked about. We're going to kind of progress our way to there by dealing with creation of realities. Given an example, I remember watching CNN the other day, and they were talking about a special that they're running about North Korea. And the reporter was asking the Koreans about America being their enemy. And we have been in that precarious position before, where we're either talking to a country or a nation leader, a national leader, in terms of them being an enemy of this country, so forth and so on. What I found amazing, Janet, was that we're talking to a group of countrymen in their country about them being an enemy to the United States, But I'm saying to myself, why? Is it because their belief is different than ours? Is it because they're communist and we're not, and we're capitalist? I mean, it would appear to me that a lot of the wars and the rumors of wars is not always predicated on an attack that has happened. Even we can talk all day about the whole inside job of 9/11, which necessitated where we are today. But still, in reality, when we look at all the other wars that have happened throughout history, they have not always been predicated on a quote-unquote attack, but simply on ideology. Is that a part of how we've been, the reality that has been created to separate us as well?
We have war within ourselves. If we're unsettled within ourselves, then we're going to feed that into the outer world. And so oftentimes it's the powers that be, again, manipulating the people below so they will go to war for ideology, so they will fight for freedom, they'll fight for this, they'll fight for that. There's certain things, they're not going to go to war and fight for oil, but they're going to go to war and fight for their freedom, to keep their sons and daughters free for generations to come. And so a lot of that is just manipulated so that the people will fall into that particular track that the powers that be want them to. They view us as, they view our emotions as something that is a weakness within us that are to be manipulated, and they can use against us and therefore manipulate us into whatever their will is versus what our will is. Again, we've lost what our will is. You know, fighting and killing, why would we do that? It's against our nature to do that. We basically are peace-loving beings when you get into the soul energy stream, like I had mentioned before.
Right.
But if we can go out there and create the persona of that we need our freedoms, that, you know, these people are communism and they're going to be taking away our freedoms and torturing us and doing all these things, and yes, it gets our emotions up and off we go. We forget the logical part of ourselves. There has to always be a balance. Like I talked about east-west, again, goes back to left brain, right brain. You know, there is no balance within us. They throw us one way and they throw us another way. I mean, think of simple things. Think of like eggs. You know, eggs, very simple. Okay, first of all, we start out eating the whole egg. We eat the yolk and we eat the white. Then they say, oh no, the yolk's bad for you, you only eat the white. Then they say, now you need to eat the yolk. Now they say, you know, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Stop! Take a look at the whole picture here. As we talked about right in the beginning of this program, it is divide and conquer. Whether it's dividing you from an egg, you know, dividing you from another country. When you mentioned slavery, I mean, few people realize that black people sold black people. And if you take it further than that, white people sold white people. And there were white slaves down on the sugar plantations who were just as much in servitude as the black people were.
Right.
But they don't teach that in history. They just divide, right on down the line. So, you know, emotionally, we're not a stable culture anymore. And we're too busy trying to learn linear logic to be able to effectively use our multidimensional logic to any capacity that serves anybody any good. And therefore, we have become extremely easy to manipulate because we don't know who we are anymore. We totally lost that connection from our source, from ourself, from reality, from pure frequency. And they're doing a very good job of leading us down. We've lost our connection to food. People don't know what food is. That represents what goes into your mind. They eat plastic. They eat chemicals. I mean, they don't eat food. They don't have true relationships. They don't fight for any reasons they're even aware of. It's all make-believe. It is all truly becoming a one big Hollywood set out there.
And you just touched on it, one big Hollywood setup, because Hollywood hasn't done us any favors either. They talk about some of the interesting things as far as the unlocking of human potential. We see it with the 4400. We see it with heroes. We see it with the X-Men, but they refer to them as mutants. But even in that paradigm, they still keep the distinction of mutants, humans.
Absolutely. Well, they plan. Powers that be, the Illuminati, they have their meetings.
Yeah.
They tell Hollywood what's going to be produced, what's going to be put out there, who the stars are going to be, who the icons are going to be. And then they splash all these stars. They have magazines written about them. And people are distracted with that. That's not the power people. Those aren't the people with money. Those are the puppets.
Mm-hmm.
And the people don't look beyond the puppets. I mean, no matter where you look, we have this illusion, we have this